This is a quick demo of our questionnaire builder. We'll be building a has-bled questionnaire, which is a questionnaire that assesses the risk of major bleeding for patients taking anticoagulants. So to start off with, I'll hit create. So we have several options for creating a new questionnaire. We can either create a blank questionnaire, we can import a questionnaire, or we can use one of our templates. So we have a couple, so McGill Pain Assessment, PHQ-9, which assesses a patient's mental health, and BMI calculator. But again, we're going to start off with a blank template. So I'll type in for title, has bled. For URL, I'll do https://gemfi.com/hasbled. And for description, assess patient's risk for major bleeding. I'll hit create. So our editor is WYSIWYG, and we create and move items using drag and drop. So to start off, I'm going to drag in a choice item type. So if I go to the right-hand side, I'll hit components. This is the available list of question types we have for a questionnaire. And I'll drag and drop in a choice item type. I'll click item to show this question's properties. And the part that we're interested in is allowed answers. So I'll perform a search here for has bled. I'll click this, and now our question is going to be using that value set to show the available list of choices. So there's yes, no, and we can also look in more detail at that value set. I'll perform a search here for has bled. I'll click the CodeSystem. So these are the concepts that value set's using. So we have yes, no, and if we click it, we can click the right-hand sidebar, and we can see an ordinal value is set to 1. So ordinal value is just going to be a decimal value that's associated to a concept. So in this case, yes is associated a value of 1, no is associated a value of 0, and this comes from the has bled spec. So let's go back to our questionnaire. Let's go and change the text. So in this case, we want to say that this question is measuring whether a patient has hypertension. So I'll paste in some text, and we'll add one more choice. So all of the questions in the has bled questionnaire are going to use that same answer value set. We'll go down to allowed answers, and we'll set the value set again to has bled. So in the interest of time, I'm going to use a questionnaire that's already been pre-built that's filled out all of these questions. It's going to be basically a rinse and repeat process of filling out the remaining questions, which I think there's around 9. So I'll click has bled comp. So this is the fully filled out questionnaire with all of those questions. And we can see, again, it's all yes, no choice types. The last remaining piece to implement is the scoring logic. So we want a score to be generated automatically as the user fills in answers. And to do that, we'll use what's called a calculated expression. So I'll drag in an integer item type, and I'll drag this in at the end of the question. We'll specify text for this to be score. And we'll go down to the structured data capture section. And inside of this, we'll type in percentage. So these are FHIR path expressions. So to use variables, they're prefixed with a percentage symbol. And we have a list of options available to us. So this is a list of the questions that we've already placed inside of our questionnaire. But we also have a couple of special variables. So we have context, factory, integer, which is the question we're currently using, and percentage resource. So we're interested in percentage resource in this case. So percentage resource is going to be the full questionnaire response of our questionnaire. So questionnaire response is the sort of like stateful component to your question. So it's the actual values the user's filling out. So we'll do percentage resource. We can see underneath the evaluation. So we can see that this is a questionnaire response with values being filled in. We'll do dot. So this will give us the properties available on this, on whatever our evaluation is returning. And it also gives us a list of available FHIR path functions. So the one that we care about is this FHIR path function called answers, which will give you all answers, in this case for our questionnaire response. and I'll do dot, and we want to use the value coding, so I'll do value coding, and then we use a special function called ordinal. So ordinal will return that ordinal value that we set on our concept. And we can see right now it's 1. If I fill in another value, so I'll do yes here. Let's go back to our score. You can now see that it's 1, 1, so it's a list with those, with both of those questions. And if we keep filling in other questions, it's going to be, increase the count. But what we want for the hasbled is the summation of all of these questions. So I'll go back to the end of this expression and do dot, and I'll do sum. So sum is equivalent to aggregate $this plus $total. Basically, it's just going to aggregate whatever list we return from the previous part of our expression. So in this case, it's going to be 2. If I fill in another question, that value gets incremented up to 3, and we can see it inside of our editor. I add another question for yes. It gets incremented to 4. If I specify no, it's not going to increment because no's ordinal value is set to 0. And if I add yes to another question, it's, again, increments that score. So our hasbled questionnaire is completed. The next step is to actually deploy this into either a dev or production environment. So I'll hit create. I'll click client application. I'll call this hasbled app. I'll hit create. So this is our interface for creating Smart on FHIR applications. And if I go to components, I can see we have a questionnaire component type. So I'll drag and drop that in. And I'll specify in local questionnaires our hasbled comp. The next part that I want to do is have the user have the ability to submit the questionnaire response to a server. And so in this case, I'll create a FHIR query. I'll use the happy public FHIR server. I'll search for a questionnaire response. So this is the list of resources available on that FHIR server. We pull this off of the capability statement. I'll set the operation to create. And inside of the body, this is a syntax called application x FHIR query. Inside of 2 braces, we use FHIR paths. And I'll search for percentage questionnaire. So that's our component's ID. Dot questionnaire response. So that's its questionnaire response. So whatever values the user's filled out. And I'll do 0, so it'll be a single value. And we can see the evaluation underneath. So that looks correct. This is the questionnaire response. It's filling in the various questions inside of there. And if we add something like yes, I'll go back here. We can see that's getting filled in automatically. I'll call this action submit QR, and I'll hit save. We'll go to components. We'll add a button. We'll call this button submit. And inside of the handlers, we'll add an on-click handler to submit the QR. I'll hit submit now. So it'll say submit QR succeeded. We can go to our submit QR, see the response. It's generated a version ID and generated an ID showing that it was successfully submitted to the server. And the next step is just to deploy this. So we have several different options for deployment. So one of them is to deploy as a public app. So if I click deploy app, I get this published app URL. And so this becomes publicly available. If we deploy inside of your subnet, you can sort of limit who can actually see it. Right now, it's going to be publicly available to anyone that has internet access. I'll unpublish it. The other option we have is Docker. So you can generate a standalone Docker image for this app. And the third option is we have the ability where you can download all of the JSON, a JSON file that includes all of the resources that are being used in this application. And you can use our app runner Docker image and basically just feed it this JSON file. So those are the 3 options available to you. I'll deploy it as a public app and just show it as a publicly available link. So this is the loaded app using that URL. The other part too that we have is we have the ability to dynamically load questionnaires from your FHIR server. So if I go back to components, I'll add a list component. I'll say questionnaires, server questionnaires, and I'll create a new action. So I'll use happy public FHIR server again, and we have several options here. We could also use smart on FHIR, smart health IT, smart on FHIR, but I'll stick with the happy public FHIR server. I'll search questionnaire. I'll call this action questionnaires. And inside of data for this list component, I'll use that action ID, so questionnaires.response. I'll hide a couple of these columns just to clean things up a little bit. Let's move name to be the first thing that's seen, and I'll remove item extensions. Okay, and I'll drag and drop in another questionnaire component. And so we'll tie this questionnaire to be whatever's selected from this list of questionnaires from that happy public FHIR server. So I'll do %list.selected. And if I select a item from this list, we can see our questionnaire widget is going to change, and it's going to actually render it accordingly. So we can embed multiple questionnaires within an app. We can also, again, pull questionnaires remotely from a server and render them. So that concludes our demo. If you have any questions, I'll leave an email that you can use to contact us. And if you'd like more information, I'll provide a link to our website and documentation. Thanks.